The All About You podcast is exactly what it says. It's a podcast dedicated to the interesting, the wonderful, and the eclectic world of you. So past episodes have included happiness, finding your perfect partner, and what a yacht nanny really does, and more. I am your host Sheila, and now let's meet this week's guest. So Matt, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Matt, this is really interesting. We are going to be talking about the I Spy Book of Life.
Yes, it sounds a bit more exciting than it might be.
Now, I remember the I Spy books as a child. Is there any connection?
Only in my mind.
Right, okay, all right. So, yeah, educate us on the I Spy Book of Life.
Okay, so I had a lot of I Spy books as a kid. So they'd have like the I Spy Book of Travel, and there'd be a bunch of different tasks in there that you can complete. So you'd go on a train and you'd score 1 point for maybe going on a train and 1 point for going on a bus, but then you might get like 3 points for going on a tram because they're a bit more unusual. There were other ones that I really enjoyed the I Spy Book of Insects. So you get 1 point for seeing a cabbage white butterfly because they're everywhere, but you might get 6 points for finding a newt because you'd really have to go and hunt it out. And I loved that idea. I think formally it's called gamification. So the idea that you turn what might be fairly boring walks in the countryside or just having to go and see your gran in a different city into a game. And in doing that, you make it much more fun, you make it much more interesting. And I particularly liked the different points that you get depending on the amount of effort that you have to put in or the amount of skill that you have to do to achieve it. And I always had a bunch of things that I wanted to do with my life. These aren't like major important things, but I always wanted to go to the site of the Chernobyl nuclear accident, for example, as a kid. You couldn't go there for a really long time because it was very radioactive. But I kind of gradually, I started writing down a bunch of things that I wanted to do, and I thought, this kind of feels like it needs to be a bit more structured. So I build websites for a living, and I thought I'll make myself a website out of this. This must have been about 10 or 15 years ago. I started it as an actual website. It's just for me. It's not for anybody else. Please don't sue me, the I Spy books. And so it's part motivation. So I find I'm very motivated by achieving things. If you give me like a big long list and I can start ticking stuff off on it, that is really motivating to me. I know it's not to everybody, but that kind of makes me work. It's partly reminding myself of my future goals. So I've got a really bad memory. You know, someone tells me, I went to this amazing castle in Germany, and I do some research and I look at some photos and I think, I'd really like to go there too. If I don't write that down within 45 minutes, I've completely forgotten it existed, and then it will be gone forever. So it's partly kind of making me remember things that I've wanted to do at some point. And then it's partly keeping track of the things that I've achieved as well. Again, like thinking about motivation, one of the things that really motivates me is acknowledging my past achievements. And again, I know I'm not an expert in psychology. I'm sure this doesn't work for everybody, but for me, if I can look back at a list of things and go, I did that, and I did that, and I did that, especially if they're cumulative, I did the really simple thing, and then I did the intermediate thing, and then I managed to achieve the advanced thing. That really it drives me to go and want to do other stuff as well.
I totally understand that, because a lot of people have a bucket list. And a bucket list, basically, if anybody's not sure, all the things you want to see, do, and maybe have before you kick the bucket, basically. Which is fine, a lot of people have a bucket list. But I also came across the concept of a reverse bucket list.
Right.
And a reverse bucket list is all the things you have done.
Oh, okay.
Now, I have to say, on an annual basis, I think this is a great idea, because what I do, when you go to a concert or you've been to a restaurant, you might have the bill, you might have a business card, you might have the ticket. Keeping those in a folder, and then when you're bored one day, get it out and go, okay, what have I done so far this year? And it's amazing if you do it at the end of the year. You think, I don't think I've done really much. Then you get out that little envelope and you look at that, I remember going to that concert, and I remember that restaurant, not going back there again. And it just really, oh my God, I've done all these things this year.
Yeah.
So we've got the bucket list going forward, the reverse bucket list looking back, and now you've got something completely different.
I talk to people about this, it's a kind of a little drive. One of the things that drives me forward in my life, and I often show it to close friends, and everybody always says, oh, it's a bucket list, but it's really not, because there are a lot of things in there that I'm not expecting to do before I die. They're kind of aspirations and dreams, but they're not like practical. I don't know a lot about bucket lists, to be honest. I've never seen the movie that it was based on, but things like one of the things is travel into space. I get 500 points if I go into space, and I think it's really, really unlikely that that's going to happen. One of the other things is fake my own death. I probably shouldn't be saying that on the podcast, because now you'll know it's on my list. But there are a couple of things in there that I'm not actually expecting to do. But it's focused on things to make me do other things rather than things to do before I die. I really don't like that focus on death of bucket lists. I don't mind talking about death. I'm not afraid of dying. But I just don't know. It seems like the focus is wrong. You're kind of focused on the wrong thing.
I think with the bucket list, the way I look at it, it is a way to make you sit down and think, okay, what do I want to do? Where do I want to go? What do I want to have experiences and stuff like that? So I think it's good in a way, because we all think we're going to live forever. Mm-hmm. And who knows, in the future we may well do. Actually,
one of the things on my book of life is live to 100, which is like probably my overarching goal of the whole of the rest of my life.
I mean, that's not unrealistic.
No, I know. I read a thing recently that said that people of my age have probably got about a 1 in 3 chance of living to 100. So I think if I'm really paying attention, and I've got quite lucky genes in terms of all my grandparents are quite old when they died, and I spend a lot of time these days looking after my health and fitness. I think I can probably do it.
I mean, I think life is just getting so fast now. This year has just flown by. When we look back at what we've done over the last year, we often think we haven't done that much. And I think often if you do lose someone, you think, okay, life is incredibly precious. Okay, maybe the idea of calling it a bucket list, but I think from that, okay, let's see what we really want to do, and let's sit down, make a list, or however you want to do it. I mean, let's go on to the space one you've just mentioned.
Okay.
Do you really want to go to space?
I would absolutely love to go into space.
Why?
Just for the experience. I've read so many articles written by astronauts where they've talked about a complete change in their perspective on the whole of their lives just from being able to see Earth from a distance. I think it would be an amazing experience. I know it's extremely dangerous. And it was a bit of a cause of strife in my marriage, because several times I've said that I would sell everything I own and give up my entire life in order to go to Mars or somewhere. And my wife's not very happy about that, because obviously it doesn't paint our relationship in a great light. That one's a bit more of a comedy one. There are a lot in there that are very serious. And they're not just about doing things or going places. There are loads of things that I want to go and see. I'd really like to go to the Arctic. I'd really like to go to the Taj Mahal. I'd really like to go to the Grand Canyon. All these things are in there as well. But then there's a lot of other different things that aren't related to going to a specific place. I'd really like to learn to fly a plane. I'd really like to cycle around the world. That's got quite a high score attached to it, because it's quite a hard thing to do.
I can understand coming up with things you want to do, places and experiences. But let's talk about the scoring system. Was that taken directly from those books, or the idea?
Yeah. And I really loved the idea that the score would be really low. So when I tried trying to formulate the list into an actual proper list that I could work from, I figured that my original basis was that 1 point would be about a weekend of effort. One of the things I wanted to do was make a knife. So I went on a knife making workshop with a friend in 2015, and we spent a whole weekend forging the metal and then refining it and shaping it and making a handle and stuff. And that was a weekend, and I got 1 point for that. Some of them are some of the ones that have much higher value points. It's not necessarily related to the amount of time. It's more about the amount of effort that you have to put into it. So when we went to Chernobyl to go and visit the not particularly radioactive nuclear power plant, I gave myself a lot of points for that, because it was a lot of effort to organise and to actually get there and all that kind of stuff, rather than just the sheer amount of time it took.
So how many points was Chernobyl?
I think I got 5 for that.
I'm just thinking your point system seems to be incredibly low.
Everybody always says this.
So
it's not some video arcade game where you're racking up hundreds of thousands of points a day. And also the most important thing is that there's nowhere does it total how many points I've achieved or how many points there are even. One of the things that I really love about the I Spy books is it's not assumed you're ever going to complete them. It's just about taking it with you every time you go for a walk and then maybe seeing another insect. So I don't think I'm ever going to complete the list. I'm not really interested in how many points I've got or how many points there are on offer, because obviously I'm making up the points and I could just assign them randomly. I didn't want to be giving myself like 1,000 points for doing anything in particular, because I think it would devalue them. There's no like inflation built into it, so I can do like a single point is this amount of effort and then go from there.
So your scale doesn't go from like 1 to 1,000 or 1 to 100. You don't sort of score it on difficulty.
No, because it's very personally mine. I feel that I can just give it a score of whatever I feel is appropriate at the time. I have adjusted them over time. There are some of the bigger ones I gave myself quite a lot of points, and then as I've got older and I realised it's probably not that hard to achieve that one, I've scaled it back a bit. I regularly go in and have a look at the list and think, all right, okay, if I've got a bit of space in my schedule, or I've done something and I've got a bit of free time, I think, oh, what can I achieve? What's on the list? Like, what haven't I done yet? Things like I'd really like to try skydiving, just like a tandem, a single one. I'm not really interested in learning to do it as a ongoing sport. I just want to see what the experience is like. And so I'm like, oh, okay. So now I'm trying to find somebody who might be interested in doing that with me. But this is something that's come out of the list. Do you want to come?
No. Didn't even have to think about that for a nanosecond.
Oh, what?
So let's just go back to your wife for a moment. So when you came up with this idea, is your wife doing her version of it?
No, not at all.
Has she got any interest in doing a version?
No, I mean, she's done some of the things. We went on a stone carving workshop years ago and she came on that. I mean, actually, I've done quite a lot of them with her. When I learned to make cheese, she was helping me with that. Yeah, there are loads of them actually. Like start my own business, obviously I work with her, so we did that together. Yeah, but she's not keeping score. She doesn't have her own list. She's motivated by very different things than me.
But she's supportive of you going off and doing all these things.
She's always been incredibly supportive of every crazy scheme that I've come up with my entire life, and I love her so much for that. Thank you, Kat.
Oh, that's lovely. Okay, so you came up with this idea.
Yeah.
You built yourself a website.
Mm-hmm.
You've allocated a point system.
Yep.
Then you're sort of working your way through the list. Are you adding things continually to the list?
Yeah. This year I've probably added like 4 or 5 things to it. That's fairly typical, and in a typical year I probably achieve maybe 2 or 3 things. So it's probably getting longer over time. I don't have a record of when I add things. I do have a record of when I achieve things, but I'd guess there's probably about 150 things on there now, and maybe 5 years ago that probably might have been 100 or a bit more. Yeah, I don't know. It's growing faster than I'm completing them.
And do you ever put something on your list, let it marinate, and then you sort of think, actually, I'm not so sure I want to do that, and you actually take it off?
After this, I think I might have to take off faking my own death. Yeah.
Now that one I think is very, very interesting.
Yeah, go on.
I'm not sure what the reason behind that would be.
It came out of a news story where there was a guy who faked his own death in the UK. I think he was called Canoe Man. I don't even remember the story. And then a couple of years later, he turned up in some photos in Panama. And
of course he's going to be in Panama, isn't he? Where else?
And I thought at the time that just really grabbed me as like a fun thing to do. But I'm not actually serious about that one.
But no, I just think the concept of that is just fascinating.
Isn't it? Yeah.
I mean, I'm not getting, macabre or gory over this, but it's just like, is it possible to do that? I mean, people live underneath the radar all the time.
Yeah.
So there's no problem in getting fake IDs and all this, that and the other.
I think it's technically
apparently.
Feasible. Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's probably highly possible.
I don't know. So for me, one of the other, apart from achieving stuff, the thing that really drives me in my life is my friends, family to a lesser extent. Sorry, family. If I had to fake my own death and go away and start somewhere completely different, I'd be devastated if I couldn't contact all the friends that I love so dearly. So I'm not actually going to do it.
But that's an interesting concept, isn't it? We've sort of laughed a bit about the idea of faking your own death. If that happened, You know, you wouldn't phone up your best friend and go, I've done it. Yeah, I got to 55 million points.
You can't tell anybody.
Do that. No.
What's the point in doing it if you can't tell anybody?
Well, even if you're not going to do it, it does make you think, and it makes for an interesting conversation.
Yeah. You need to try and find a guest to interview who's big, through and deaf.
Do you sort of sit down? I mean, this is going out for New Year's Eve, because I'm hoping this is going to inspire people for 2024.
Wow.
Do you sort of sit down once a year and sort of look back and look forward? Do you use that new year as something?
Yeah, not related to this though. There's another really great tool. Have you ever heard of Year Compass?
No.
So it's a website. I think it's yearcompass.com, YEARCOMPASS. And they have a PDF that you download. The idea is normally that you do it at the end of the year. And it's a bunch of pages. The first half of it is reflecting on the year that you've had. So you write down pretty much like everything you've achieved during the year, all the fun things that you've done, the things that you're proud of, the things that didn't quite work out. And then the second half is planning your year ahead and thinking about, okay, so I looked at all the things that I did last year. What does that mean, like, to me? What do I want to do next year? What can I achieve? Like, what are the things that I discovered are important that I want to bring over into the new year? And that is amazing. I've done it a few years. Like around Christmas, New Year time, and I couldn't recommend it highly enough. It's free. It'll probably take you 3 hours. It's a really good thing to do with friends as well. A couple of times we've done it where we'll print out a bunch of things to sit on the sofa and everybody will like scratch it, like filling it in. All you can hear is like the pencil scratching it. And then people will be just like, I totally forgot I did this. And it led to some really interesting conversations, and you get to like know your friends in a different way. So I think it's a really good group activity.
I love that.
Right, you should definitely do it.
Because I'm very much reflecting, I very much, do journaling and that sort of stuff. I love planning. Mm-hmm. I'm a process thinker, so that just makes my heart sing.
Right, okay.
And what a great activity to do with friends.
It's I don't know how we came up with the idea of doing it in a group, but it's brilliant.
Oh, I can just imagine all sitting down with a glass of wine and doing that, and then talking about particularly some of the stuff you have done, because a lot of it for the future could well be private, and I respect that 100%. But some of the conversations, I forgot that I did this and this.
Yeah. So
I love that.
It's literally, I think it asked you to like go through your calendar and day by day and just look at what things that you did last year. Obviously it's a lot easier if you've got a digital calendar.
Getting back to your I Spy book then of life, what do your friends think about it? Have any of those been inspired by it?
I don't think so. No one's ever mentioned it, no. I think people just think it's another crazy scheme that I've come up with. I think actually this leads into another website that my wife Kat and I built, which I don't know if we've talked about previously at all off the podcast. Kat and I built a museum of our lives. Did we ever talk about this?
No.
Okay.
Oh my God.
So where the I Spy Book of Life is like primarily focused on things that I want to do in my future, the museum is just a record of everything that we've done in our lives up to this point. It came out of my parents were going to move house, and they had hundreds and hundreds, I think it was about 5,500 photos of my childhood and beyond, and their childhood and their like grandparents and stuff. And when they were moving into a much smaller house in a different country, they didn't want to take like stacks and stacks of photos, so we thought, we'll just get them all professionally scanned in. When they came back, we're like, right, we need some way of like organising this, because there's a lot of information here. And the kind of museum came out of that, of all these things, like exactly what you were talking about earlier, about having all the ticket stubs from every concert you've ever been to, all the theatre plays that you've seen, and all the times where you've been on really amazing holidays, or people you've known who've died, that you don't want to forget about them, and you want to commemorate them in some way. All of those things and way more have all kind of come into this museum that we started building for ourselves. So there's currently, I think there's about 1,500 things in it. It's digital, it's like a mobile app just for me and Kat. And it's searchable, so you can say, okay, show me everything I did in 2015, and it will just list all the things that we've added. So every time I went off on a rally driver weekend with a friend, you kind of see what happened. It's got links to things like Google Photos albums, so if I took a bunch of pictures, we'll just have one in the museum, and then there'll be a link to a bunch of other things in there.
Oh my God, that has just blown my mind is thinking about the drawer with the ticket stubs. And
sure. And the main driving force behind that was that we didn't want to I don't want to get to like 75 and have one room of my house completely devoted to just ticket stubs and crap from the rest of my life. And so, we made it all digital. We scanned in all these photos. Kat and I scanned in a load of photos from our own lives as well, probably maybe about the same number of pictures. And then we just destroyed the originals, so they all just went away. And it's so liberating, because we've got this thing now. I've got a digital copy of everything. You can search, especially if you upload the pictures to Google Photos, you can search by name. So, it categorises all the people. It says, oh yeah, this is your mother, and that photo that's also your mother. And then you can just say, right, show me all the pictures of my mum, and then there they all are.
I mean, you are absolutely right. We've all got suitcases, boxes and bags of stuff. Mm. And, it's all the paper things, the photographs, the tickets, all of that, as you say. And taking that forward, you could sit down once a month with that little pack of things you've done in the last 4 weeks, scan it, put it on, and little blurb, I did this with so-and-so,
exactly
we went there, it was a great restaurant, whatever.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah. So one of the things that the things that led to the formation of the museum was when Kat and I were at university. We were at different universities, and we wrote to each other pretty much every day for 3 years, because this was before email was widely available. When we were back at her parents' house, going through a load of our possessions that we left in their loft, we found a suitcase full of all of our letters from university, and we started reading them. We're like, this feels like somebody else. This feels like...
Oh my God.
Yeah, and it was quite disturbing. In the end, we burnt them all.
Wow.
But now, having created the museum, I think there was actually a lot of information in there that might have been useful to put in. But anyway, it's gone, so it doesn't matter.
But I mean, I think that's great, because you're documenting your past life.
Yeah.
Finally sorting out what you're going to do with all those photographs, because people are talking about decluttering, etc. And the hardest thing is the photographs, the letters, with somebody's handwriting on that, yes, you want to treasure. And the fact to scan it and you can write a little blurb for it.
Yeah. And
it's just absolutely magical.
And as long as it's in a format that you're definitely not going to lose. Like if you do it you just scan it onto your computer and you never do a backup, it's still at risk. But we've got multiple backup processes. We build websites all day, every day anyway. So I'm confident that we're never going to lose this information. So that it doesn't matter if we don't have the physical objects anymore.
So have you got any other people that have picked up your Museum of Life idea?
Actually, there's a lot more interest for that than there is for the I Spy Book of Life, which is a very idiosyncratic me thing. We've talked about trying to do the museum as like a commercial project. I don't think it would be something that we just like make an app and people can download and start doing it. I think it would be something people commission us to build a museum for them specifically. This is not a cheap thing. Where they give us all the documents and we spend ages interviewing them and constructing this thing that's created just for them. So it's a very niche market. I don't think it's ever going to make us billionaires. But I'd be really interested to do it as a commission. I think it's a huge piece of work to do for anybody. I mean, I couldn't even guess how many hours we've spent on creating our own to get to this state. And obviously it's a lot easier to make our own than anybody else's. When I was young, I always used to really despise nostalgia. I was always very focused on the future and really like, okay, where are we going to go next? What are we going to do in the future? And as I get older, I'm much more interested in where did I come from? Why do I feel this way? Like, what were the things that influenced me to become this way? I'm much more interested in my history and history generally. I
think the thing is with that though, Matt, as we get older, we are more inquisitive about our past. And I know, you get out the family photographs, you're looking for something else, you think, who is this person? I have got no idea. And you think, back in the day, occasionally people would write on the back of the photograph, and over the decades the ink has gone. But you think, what do I do with this picture? It's in the family box or bag. I don't know who this is. I've got nobody alive who I can ask now. What do I do? Moral, I feel it's wrong to get rid of it, because in theory it's a family member because it's in the family.
But if it doesn't mean anything, if no one's got any idea who it is, are you going to hold that picture until you die?
It just goes back in the suitcase, absolutely. But I mean, this is it. It's the sentimental things that are the hardest. We're quite happy chucking away, a lot of stuff. But it's the letters and I've got birthday cards from my parents. It makes sense. Scan the front and the back. I've got their handwriting, the sentiment, and the actual copy of the card.
And you've got more space in your house because you've got rid of yet another suitcase full of trash.
And this is the same for everybody, isn't it? we've all got a box, a bag, or a suitcase in the attic, in the garage, in the shed. We've all got it.
Yeah. I know people who are like drowning in stuff of mementos from their lives, of physical objects. But I personally found it an incredibly liberating experience to not have to carry all that stuff around. Because otherwise, every time you move house, you're moving like, oh yeah, this is the box of photos. We moved into a house in 2008 when we used to live in Cornwall in the UK, and we had 10 enormous boxes full of CDs. And then 10 years later, when we left the house, all the CDs were still in the boxes. We hadn't taken a single one out in all that time. And I'm like, oh, this is just... We have to buy a bigger house just so we can store all this stuff that we don't need. That's kind of like a cornerstone of the whole thing. If you don't have all this stuff, you can live in a smaller space, and now you don't have to spend so much money on doing this thing and carrying all this thing. And every time you move house, it's easier because you're not also having to move all that other rubbish.
Exactly. I mean, this is it. I mean, I never will buy a hardback book, a paperback now.
Sure.
Yeah, I'll buy 3 trashy things to read on the beach in the summer, and that's it. Everything else is on my Kindle.
Yeah, and I've got one too, and I swear by it.
Absolutely. You're wandering around and, with it in your pocket, and you've got 200 books.
Yeah.
All your stuff is on, I was going to say iPod. I mean, I mourn the loss of the iPod.
Really?
Yeah, I absolutely, on iPod, loved it. I mean, I think that was a bad decision of Apple to get rid of that.
Oh.
But I never play any music on my phone. It's just alien to me.
Okay.
My old iPod, touch wood, is still working, and
Wow.
I have it in the kitchen, and I've still got stuff on there. I thought the iPod was one of the greatest inventions, absolutely brilliant. But I don't want music on my phone. I don't like having my life on the phone. And yes, that is the way it is now. And I think particularly for older people, they don't like that. Their banking, their entertainment, everything is on your phone. But,
Yeah, it's really difficult, especially if you lose your phone. That gets quite painful.
Well, yeah, exactly. But yeah, I love the idea of this is a great way to document birthday cards, letters, I don't know, kids' stories you wrote, and you can look back on that and write. You might remember being in that primary school and your favourite teacher, so you can actually add a little bit to that. I think that's great.
Oh, wow. Well, if you want to commission us to document your life, I'm not even sure we're ready to start, please don't. And so there's a lot of things, and then it's a mobile app that Kat and I have on our phones, and every morning now over breakfast I always just open it up, and it lists all the things that happened on this day in previous years, and I'm like, oh yeah, I remember winning that fancy dress prize at school, or we did that escape room that day, you remember, in 2015, that was really fun, I really enjoyed that.
I must admit, I did download an app, and I can't think what it was called now, and basically the idea is you take one photo every day and you just write a sentence about it. I think I lasted about 2 days. I just forget.
It's quite hard, yeah.
Yeah. One thing I do, which I've done for quite a while now, is a thing called Future Me, where you write a letter to yourself.
I love it.
I absolutely love that, I have to say. And I use that all the time, particularly for goals, things that I want to accomplish. And it's really where you are now, what you want to accomplish, how you're going to go about it. It's basically, an accountability. That's how I use it. So I use it more for that than anything else. And then, you say, right, I want it back in a month. Okay, this is what I said I was going to do this month. Have I actually done it?
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, and that's how I use it. And that is actually quite good because you are talking to yourself, basically.
Yeah.
You're motivating yourself today, saying, right, by the 15th of the following month, this is what I want to have achieved. And if you haven't done it, you've got to say to yourself, right, well, why not? And let's face it, you're harder on yourself than you would be on anybody else.
Oh my God, yes.
So as an accountability tool,
right,
I think it's really useful. I mean, I normally do it for like a month and 3 months. Whether you can do it for a week or what, I don't know. But I find that's a really useful, because you know yourself. So you're going to say, okay, what do I realistically think I'm going to do? Look at the diary going, okay, well, there's a lot going on this month. I'm going to keep it quite short. and you maybe 1 or 2 things. If you've got quite a clear month, okay, I'm actually going to pack in 3 or 4 things and work out how you're going to do it. It's like a working document, what you plan to do. And then when you get that email in your inbox, you're a bit like, okay, right, take a deep breath. How have I done?
Ooh, and how have you done normally?
Normally it's not that bad, but it is a good way of highlighting where you've been slacking off.
Right, I use it for a completely different purpose.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? The fact that we have the same app and we use it for 2 different things.
Yeah, I write, mine turns up once a year. I think it's in June or July, and I manage to completely forget about it in the intervening time. So every year I get an email from myself from a year ago, which is, and all I do, and then I write another one immediately, is just writing about what my life is and how I feel at the moment, like things that we've done recently, like how I feel as a person. It always feels really special when it turns up, because I've completely forgotten the system even exists. I've totally forgotten how I felt a year ago. And to get this thing where I'm being really heartfelt and honest, because only I'm reading it, and I'm like, oh yeah, I remember what it was like to feel that, or I remember like feeling those emotions at that point. So completely different, but
yeah. But I love
valid.
that. I love the way we've both got the same tool and we're choosing to use it in 2 different ways.
I didn't even know you could do it at frequencies less than a year.
Yeah,
yeah,
definitely. Yeah.
Wow, I'm gonna
but
start
I have to say, as you forget about it and it ends up in your inbox a year later, mine comes up every month. I'm like, oh, okay, let's have a look.
Mine sounds much more joyous because I'm always really happy to receive it.
But I think this is amazing, though, the I Spy Book of Life. I think that is absolutely brilliant.
Thanks.
You started off saying you went on a weekend to learn how to make a knife and you gave yourself 1 point. I just think 1 point.
Well, how many points would you give yourself? This is a big bone of contention among everybody I ever talk to about this.
Well, this is my process mind. I'm thinking, okay, first thing was the idea came across your radar somehow. It's not the sort of thing that you can just probably do where you live. It's not like you can go to the gym and you can do that particular class. You had to do a lot of research. I'm sure there was money involved. You had to pay for it.
Yeah.
It was a weekend. You had to get there. You had accommodation, food, the cost of the actual skills.
It was only about half an hour down the road from where I lived, so...
Well, yeah, but it's still the planning. So to me, there's a lot of moving parts to end up with your goal, which was to make a knife. And did you complete the goal you did?
Yes, yeah.
And you gave yourself 1 point.
I did, yeah. I think I did a really good job. I'm very happy with the knife, and I totally deserve that 1 point.
But 1 point, I think is just...
When you start your own I Spy Book of Life, you can assign the points however you like.
But I think that's incredibly hard on yourself, 1 point.
But otherwise it just becomes like I can see how it could easily inflate, and you're giving yourself like 50,000 points for doing this one thing. They're fictional points. There's no one's keeping score. It's only for me. I don't think it really matters how many points I give myself.
I think the thing is because I'm sort of quite goal orientated.
Me too.
And process thinking. I go, okay, what I want to do is to make a knife. You've got the idea, right? Let's say you read about it in a magazine. I've got the idea. Okay, number 1, I've got to research where can I do this?
Yep.
How can I do it? How much is it going to cost me? How do I get there? Is there any preparation? Do I have to rack up with particular bits of equipment? Book somewhere to stay? How much is it going to cost me? Well, how can I, feed myself? This sort of thing. So to me, looking at that whole process, so for one person, it might be, okay, this week, I'm just going to try and find out where I could do it. Mm-hmm. Week 2, okay, I'm going to send that company an email and get the brochure or all the information. Mm-hmm. Week 3, I'm going to decide if I want to do it and look at the financial. So this could be an 8-week goal, just planning all the bits.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, some of the things have been made up of lots of different parts. I made myself a bronze sword at home. And that took a lot of processing because first of all I had to learn how to make charcoal, and then I had to learn how to make a metal furnace, and then I had to learn how to do sand casting, and that was a multi-stage process. This
was all going on in your kitchen, was it?
I was doing it on the driveway at the back of the house. Yeah, I wouldn't do it indoors. It's quite hot. You have to get it quite hot. And that took me that must have been 18 months from coming up with the idea. When we used to live in Cornwall where there's a lot of tin mining, we went to visit a few tin mines, and I became fascinated with this idea that 2,000 years ago you could take a bunch of tin ore and a bunch of copper ore and make an actual physical object out of it. And my original goal, which was very ambitious, was I was going to buy tin ore and copper ore, just the rock, and pulverize it and then extract the metal and then make the sword out of it. But I gave up pretty quickly because I think it was something like 7 tons of rock to make a single sword.
Oh, I'm sure.
Turns out it's a lot harder than I thought it was. So I just bought some tin. I bought like 150 grams of tin off eBay. Someone gave me a whole load of scrap copper pipes and I melted them all down. And then, but that was like a really long process. I had to learn how to cast in aluminium first because the temperature's a lot lower and it's a lot easier to do. And then I moved on to doing it in bronze.
I mean, it's amazing you actually chose to do that. And then the education you have received along the way.
I learned a lot about a lot of things doing that, yes.
And I think that's the thing, isn't it? Because we start talking of, okay, these are things I've got on my I Spy Book of Life. But the education you receive for finding out about the activity and then actually doing the activity far outweighs, okay, this was my original idea, I'm going to make this. It's just incredible.
Yeah, the actual sword's not very impressive. I messed up part of the casting process, and so it's more like a large knife than an actual sword. And that was part of the process, making mistakes, learning as you go along. Yeah. I usually find the process more interesting than the end result in pretty much anything. You
are just a person you've got your own business, which you run with your wife. You've got this I Spy Book of Life. You're not sitting on the sofa watching Netflix every night, are you?
We do watch a lot of movies.
Okay.
But no, I'm aware that I'm more motivated than most people. But I think this is something that I've learned to do. Like, I wasn't particularly motivated when I was young. I think for me, achieving things and recognising those achievements encourages me to go on and do other things. I'm sure everybody's different, but if I can look back and go, I did this, and then I did that, and then I did that, makes me go, oh, maybe I can do that. And because it gives me confidence, learning to make a knife, I'm like, oh, okay, right, metal's quite interesting. Maybe I can learn to make my own sword on my own. And I'm like, okay, it's going to be hard and it's going to take me a long time. But I think, every step of the way, like, I've made one out of aluminium and it's rubbish because it's really bendy and you can't do anything with it. But that worked. Maybe that gives me the confidence to try to move up another little step and another step.
I think that leads quite nicely into like the reverse bucket list, because when you look back on the things you have done, you actually think, okay, I passed my driving test, or I did this, because we're not very good as human beings of giving ourselves a pat on the back.
No, we definitely need to
when we achieve something, we are more like, done that, what's next? As opposed to, wow, I've done that. Oh my God, that is amazing. It may not be amazing to somebody else, but to us...
Yeah, I mean, I think you're never going to get anywhere if you're only motivated by what other people think of you.
Exactly. But this looking back at your past achievements, and particularly making the sword, there is so much involved in that. And you said, it wasn't perfect, but the amount of education and probably a bit of fun, a lot of frustration, I should imagine, doing that.
More fun than frustration in that case, yeah. But I've had other instances where I've spent ages doing things and it didn't really work out. Yeah. But I think, no, definitely, we all need to celebrate our achievements a lot more, even really tiny ones. I think that's probably the goal, the way to happiness, is just celebrating the things that you've done.
I mean, thinking back to your Museum of Life, I mean, I haven't got them now, unfortunately, but I was thinking... Probably before my parents died, they had certificates when I won like a cake competition at primary school. Now that would be an amazing thing to have had in my Museum of Life.
What happened to it?
I think it got chucked out when they passed.
It's all right. Yeah. There are loads of things that we wanted to put in our museum that are they don't exist, or we don't know. I remember doing this thing. I've got no idea what happened. We haven't got a photo. I can barely put a description together. I couldn't even tell you what year it happened. Like, how am I going to put it in? The museum has, you can set either a year or a month or an actual date. And most of the things have got photos, probably 75% of them. And there are some things which are pretty vague, like, I remember doing this thing. But the more concrete you can be, the more useful it is and the more interesting it is to read about it in the future.
But it's funny though, isn't it, this conversation? All of a sudden I thought about winning a cake competition when I was at primary school.
Well done.
Thank you very much.
What was the cake? Do you remember?
I can't remember. I think it was probably something like little tiny sponge cakes or something.
Oh, congratulations.
Because my nan was a fabulous cook and my mum was a fabulous cook. And yeah, I do remember winning the competition, having these little tiny certificates, yeah.
But it's lost in the mist of time now. And do you keep in touch with anybody else from school?
Yeah, I do actually. Not as far back as junior school, no.
Right.
It's interesting you mentioning staying in contact, because at secondary school, one of my friends passed away this year.
No.
And I attended her cremation online, like a lot of people did, and they went through her life, and we're basically the same age.
Yeah.
That was a very, very sobering
I'm sure.
afternoon. Things like that, you know, it hasn't got to be perfect, but I think let's all start on our Museum of Life. I think it's a brilliant idea. Absolutely brilliant.
If there's things you want to do in your life, you need to get out and do them right now, because you might not be here tomorrow.
I think you have looked at both ends. With the Museum of Life, it's things you have done in the past.
Yeah.
The I Spy book is what you're currently working on and ideas for the future.
Yeah. It wasn't ever that. It just evolved like that. I never had a conscious plan to. Right, I'm going to create these two things, and it's not really until I was thinking about it in the run up to this podcast that I was like, oh, I suppose they are kind of bookended.
Yeah,
one
absolutely.
of them's looking forwards and one of them's looking backwards. Yeah.
So I think that is a good way to end the podcast and to say a very happy new year to you, Matt.
Happy New Year to you too. Have a great 2024.
Thank you, and you too. Thanks, Matt. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Please subscribe for future episodes on whatever platform you are listening on. It is free. And if you have a story to tell, please contact me on allaboutyoupocast@yahoo.com and let's tell your story.